thank you again to Ruben and to Rolly for giving that awesome introduction to MIDI polyphonic expression. I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. I'm with a company called Sensel. We make a touch controller called the Morph, and we'll get to that in a second. But what I'm here today to talk about is our relationship with a legendary synthesizer company called Buchla and how that all came together. So first off, just a little bit of background about how we see MPE. So if you think about how you might play an acoustic instrument like a violin, it's not just whether a note's on or a note's off, right? There's the vibrato that you apply with your finger, the pressure, the friction of the bow. There's all these different things. Whereas for the last few decades, the way that you play a digital instrument has kind of remained the same. The key press is on, the key press is off, maybe there's a few notes of pressure. So the interesting thing about Don Buchla is that decades before MPE was a thing, so this goes back to the 60s where when any of his innovations first came about, he kind of envisioned that there must be a different way to play electronic instruments, whether analog or eventually digital. Basically, Don rejected the idea that you just needed to play with a piano interface. You know, this worked well for what was called East Coast synthesis, but he had different ideas, and they ended up with very interesting innovations, very interesting ways of playing. This is one of the first things that he did, actually, which was an effects unit for the Merry Pranksters for their bus, the Nut Shop. This was a delay that they would use when they were kind of having their freakouts. I don't know if any of you saw recently in the news, a long urban legend about Don Buchla was confirmed, that there was in fact a little bit of LSD on one of his old panels. So, and you know, this is some of the kind of legendary players of his synths. If you look at, so this is Suzanne Shawnee and Caitlin Rayleigh Smith making an album together. Caitlin is a bit of a protege of Suzanne's. Suzanne is a legendary sound designer. You've probably heard her name before. Caitlin is kind of up and coming and has some really wonderful albums to her name as well. So if you notice what Suzanne is playing there, it kind of looks like an eagle. It's got some feather things, some wings. It's not a keyboard, it's very different. So that is based on an interface that Don Buchla created called the Thunder. And the idea was it was supposed to feel natural to the fingers. You were supposed to be able to slide to put pressure on it. It was also inspired by his love for Native American art. So here's another famous Buchla player, Morton Subotnick, also playing the Thunder. The Thunder is wonderful, it's fantastic. Just as a show of hands, how many people in the audience own a Thunder, an actual Thunder? Awesome. Does anyone else know how much it might cost? What? Right, that's the 223E. Does anyone else have an idea about how much a Thunder or 223E might cost you today? There you go. As that gentleman said, it's about $3 grand. It's, yeah. It's not easy. Buchla is high quality, and they know it. So, West Coast synthesis, as I briefly mentioned earlier, this is what Don Buchla pioneered. Simple waves become complex. You use things like wave folding, low-pass gates instead of the kind of Moog East Coast standard of separate filter, separate gate. Randomness is very important, as is being playful. Colors. This is the Buchla easel, which we'll touch on a little bit when I get to the plugin. The point is, in both the controllers he designed and the synthesizers he designed, Don was a singular vision in terms of really kind of playing with the mind and, you know, kind of almost like a childlike sense of discovery when it came to synthesis. So here's the Morph, Sensel Morph, that's what I'm presenting. This is our controller. What it is it is a touchpad that has 20,000 of what are called sensels. So just as a pixel is a picture element, a sensel is a sensing element. So there's 20,000 of them, they interpolate, and it's multi-touch, and each touch can sense 32,000 levels between 5 grams and 5 kilograms of pressure. So there's a lot you can do with this, and the way that we like to play it is you put on different overlays. So some of them are quite familiar. For example, this is a piano overlay. You can just put it on, and it locks in magnetically. The magnets also tell the Morph what overlay you just put on. The Morph can communicate via USB, it can communicate via Bluetooth, and there's also a cable to connect it directly to microcontrollers, like the Raspberry Pi or the Arduino. So the Buchla Thunder Overlay, which is our latest, is a little bit different. It's a new type of interface. It isn't a piano. You don't necessarily know how to play it, but that's almost all the fun of it, really. We have a number of presets that people start with when they get a Morph, and when they get the Buchla Thunder Overlay. And I'm actually going to shut up now and actually just show you some of that. So here I'm just going to connect. And we can actually stay beaming. There's no reason why not. So for starters, I'm going to show a synthesizer called Alto, which I'm sure some of you have heard of, which is so this is a synthesizer that's based on Buchla designs, but it's digital, it's virtual. So if I turn this on, oh, my sound was down. So essentially what's happening there is the pressure of my touch and the X and Y coordinates of my touch are contributing to different parameters that are mapped within the synthesizer. So whereas normally I might just get, one note on, one note off, this gives me such a deeper level of expression. And the Buchla Thunder Overlay is particularly good for that because of how the keys are shaped, because of how this all ends up working out. So another synth that I want to show you when we're looking at MPE is called Quanta by Audio Damage. So Quanta is a granular synthesizer. Audio Damage, some of you might be familiar with, it's Chris Randall's company. And Quanta also takes MIDI polyphonic expression. And what you're going to see here is the position of the samples that I'm playing back through this granular synthesizer, and where things are is controlled by my touch. So that's a little thing I put together that I called Canadian Horizon. A penny to anyone who can guess what the influence was for that sound. But basically, so you get this kind of detuned, wonky sound. You get moving around different parts on the sample. Again, it's bringing an acoustic level of playing to a digital instrument. So one more thing that I wanted to show you, since we did already look at Equator with Ruben, thank you. So the last thing I wanted to show you is actually MIDI. So one cool thing about the Morph is it outputs MIDI, it outputs MPE, it outputs HID data for gaming, it outputs keystrokes. We have overlays for video editing. We have overlays for a QWERTY keyboard. We have overlays for all sorts of things. You can make your own overlay with the Innovators overlay, which please come by our booth. It's in the second hall over there and see us later. But it also does MIDI, and there's no better synth to show off how this does MIDI than the Buchla Easel by Arturia. I'm just going to resize this so you can see a little bit more of it. There we go. So this is a legendary synthesizer that Don Buchla designed. And all I need to do here is switch to a new preset. The preset system is new in the Buchla Thunder Overlay. And now I'm outputting MIDI and not MIDI polyphonic expression. So for synths like the Buchla Easel here, which sound great but don't yet have MPE enabled, this is exactly the solution. So. Also, if that's too wonky, I can very easily turn off certain things, like pitch bend. My presets are very experimental. I apologize, I'm not as talented as Ruben, so I can't play classical music with this thing, but you could. The point is, really, the possibilities are limitless. And another thing that's great about this Arturia synth is that these purple connectors right here immediately take pressure. So thank you all so much for coming. My name is David. I'm with Sensel. Please come to our booth. We're right around the corner from Rolly. Come visit both of us. And thank you so much to the Lewins and Synthtopia for hosting this.